winter of 1897 settled hard over the mountains, sealing the valleys in white silence. Snow pressed heavy on the branches, and the air itself seemed to sting when a man drew breath. A drifter named Eli Ward moved through the pines, his boots crunching against the crusted ground. He had no destination except forward, no reason but the restless pull of miles. Men like him didn't belong to towns, they belonged to the road, to the firelight, to the forgotten corners of wilderness where only wind and hunger kept company. But that night, as dusk thickened, and the first stars flickered above the ridges, Eli heard something that made him stop mid-stride. At first, he thought it was the wind splitting around the trees, but then it rose again, thin, ragged, and desperate. A cry. Not the cry of an animal, not the warning call of a crow. A human cry. Eli's hand dropped instinctively to the revolver at his side, though he knew bullets were of little use against cold or sorrow. He turned his head, listening. The sound wavered again, farther in, somewhere deep in the pines where the snow swallowed trails and men lost themselves. His horse stamped, uneasy, steam curling from its nostrils. "Easy, girl," Eli murmured, patting her neck. But the cry came again, sharper now, and something inside him twisted. A man could keep riding. A man could pretend the woods held nothing but shadows. But Eli had lived too long with ghosts to let another be born on his watch. He left the saddlebag slung over his shoulder and pressed on foot, following the voice. Each step sank him knee-deep, the cold clutching his legs, the forest pressed close, silent but for that cry. Weak now, like it was fading. Then he saw it. At the base of a leaning pine, half buried in drift, lay the form of a woman. Snow had gathered on her hair and shoulders as if the mountain itself meant to swallow her whole. Her hands were bound in front, ropes stiff with frost. Her lips moved, shaping the sound he had followed across the forest. A cry, barely alive. Eli dropped to his knees beside her, brushing the snow from her face. Her skin was grey with cold, her eyes heavy-lidded, but still searching, still fighting. She whispered something he couldn't catch, too faint against the crackling wind. "You hold on," Eli said, his voice rough but steady. "You ain't alone anymore." And for the first time in years, the drifter felt purpose strike him like fire in the veins. Eli worked fast. The ropes were frozen stiff, biting into the woman's wrists like iron bands. He pulled his knife from his belt, the blade glinting faint under the pale moonlight, and sawed through the cords until they snapped apart. Her hands sagged into his, limp and blue at the knuckles. "Damn," he muttered under his breath. The cold had bitten deep. He rubbed her wrists with his palms, trying to coax a little life back into them. Her eyelids fluttered, and she whispered again, her voice thin as thread. "Please." He leaned closer, catching the word, but nothing more came. Just a rattling breath that carried more frost than air. Eli shrugged off his coat, the only barrier he had against the mountain's bite, and wrapped it tight around her shoulders. She sagged into it, her head lolling forward against his chest. For a moment he just held her there, her weight frighteningly light, her warmth nearly gone. "You're gonna make it," he told her, though he didn't know if it was true. "I'll see to that." The horse waited where he'd left her, hooves shifting in the snow. Eli lifted the woman in his arms, every bone in her body sharp under the fabric of her dress, and carried her to the saddle. It was no easy thing to balance her across the horse and climb up himself, but necessity gave strength. Soon he had her pressed against him, his coat bundled around them both, his arms steadying her as the horse started forward. The question clawed at him with every step through the trees. Who would leave a woman tied up in the wilderness, left to freeze like an animal? This wasn't chance. He knew cruelty when he saw it. The marks on her wrists, the gag of frost at the corner of her mouth. Someone had meant for her to die out here. He looked down at her face, pale as bone in the starlight. Whoever had tried to erase her from the earth hadn't counted on him wandering these woods tonight. The thought filled him with a slow, dangerous fire. But fire alone wouldn't keep her breathing. She needed warmth, shelter, something more than the ragged rhythm of a drifter's heartbeat. There was a hunting cabin he knew of, half a day's ride east, if the horse could push through the snowdrifts. He tightened his hold on her, bent close to her ear, and spoke low. "Stay with me. Just a little longer, you hear me? We'll find firelight soon." Her lips trembled as if to answer, but no sound came. Her head fell against his shoulder, and he felt the terrifying weight of someone slipping further and further away. Eli pressed his heels to the horse and urged it faster. The night swallowed them whole, the sound of hooves muffled under snow, and the woman's faint breath the only fragile thing tethering her to life. The storm thickened as if the mountains themselves wished to keep secrets buried. Snow came down in heavy sheets, stinging Eli's face and blinding the trail. His hat brim iced over, his beard crusted white, but he leaned low over the woman in his arms, shielding her as best he could. Every mile felt longer than the last. The horse pushed on, sides steaming, hooves crunching deep into the frozen drifts. Eli whispered to her as they rode, not sure if she could hear. "Stay awake, darling. Just a bit farther. There's a roof ahead. A fire." But her head lolled against him, the weight of her body frighteningly slack. He pulled his coat tighter around them both, pressing her against his chest so she could steal what little heat his body still carried. Each shallow breath of hers rattled through him like a reminder that time was running thin. Then, through the veil of storm, he saw it. A shape crouched low beneath the trees, half hidden by snow. The cabin, weather-worn, smoke long gone from its chimney, but walls nonetheless. Shelter. Eli urged the horse forward, nearly sliding from the saddle as he dismounted with her in his arms. His boots sank knee-deep in the drift, but he fought through, shouldering the cabin door until it gave with a groan. Inside, shadows, dust, and cold. No fire, no light, just the bitter scent of old wood. But 4 walls and a roof were blessing enough. He lowered her onto a cot in the corner, her face pale as death against the rough wool. "Don't quit on me now," he muttered, striking a match with trembling hands. Sparks flared, then fire caught on dry kindling he found near the hearth. Flames crackled to life, small but defiant, throwing their first glow against the cabin walls. He moved quickly, blankets scavenged from a chest, more wood piled onto the fire. Then he sat beside her, rubbing her hands between his own, coaxing blood back into frozen fingers. Her eyes fluttered open for a flicker of a second. Grey eyes, wide with some mix of fear and confusion, met his. "You're safe," he said, voice softer now. "No one's gonna hurt you here." Her lips trembled as if to form a word, but only a broken whisper escaped. Eli leaned close. "Name?" he asked. "Can you tell me your name?" Her breath shivered past her lips, but he couldn't catch the sound. Whatever story she carried was locked behind her silence, buried as deep as the storm outside. Still, she was alive, and for now, that was enough. Eli sat back, the firelight dancing over her fragile form. Whoever had left her in the snow hadn't just tried to kill her, they'd wanted her erased, forgotten, but she wasn't gone yet. And as long as he drew breath, he wouldn't let her slip away. The storm raged through the night, clawing at the cabin walls as though it meant to tear them down. Inside, the fire grew strong, snapping and spitting sparks into the black air. Eli dozed lightly in a chair beside her cot, rifle leaned against the wall, boots still on. He wasn't a man who trusted sleep, not out here, not when trouble had a habit of finding him. But sometime past midnight, the sound of a cough pulled him from the edge of slumber. He straightened. She was stirring. Her chest rose and fell more steadily now, color seeping faintly back into her face. The grey of her eyes blinked open once again, sharper this time, fixed on the firelight. Eli leaned forward. "You're all right. Cabin's mine. Name's Eli." She swallowed hard, her throat working as though the simple act pained her. Finally, a whisper, barely audible over the fire. "Clara." The name cracked the silence like glass. Eli nodded slowly, repeating it under his breath, as though making it solid and real again. "Clara, he said. "Reckon you had yourself a hell of a night." Her gaze flicked toward the door, then the window half covered in frost. There was fear there, not of him, but of something still out in the storm. "They'll come back," she rasped. Her voice was raw, broken. "Don't let them." Eli felt the weight of her words sink deep. Whoever they were, they'd tried to bury her in the snow, and if she was right, they weren't done. He reached for the blanket, tucking it tighter around her shoulders. "Ain't nobody getting through that storm tonight. You rest. I'll see to the watch." But Clara shook her head weakly, her breath quickening. "You don't understand. They always come back." Her eyes closed again, exhaustion pulling her under. Eli sat back, jaw tight. He stared into the fire as the wood cracked and spat, every muscle in his body humming with alertness. He'd found her half-frozen, left for dead, but that was only the beginning of it. Somewhere out in the storm, men were hunting, and they weren't finished with Clara. The storm broke by dawn, leaving the forest wrapped in a brittle, crystalline silence. Snow lay deep against the cabin walls, heaped high on the roof until it sagged. Eli had not slept. He sat in the chair still, boots planted square on the rough plank floor, rifle resting easy across his knees. Clara stirred again as the pale light seeped through the cracks in the shutters. Her voice was faint, but steadier than the night before. "You stayed," she whispered. Eli gave a half-smile. Would have been a sorry kind of man to walk off. Her lips trembled, but whether it was a smile or a shadow of sorrow, he couldn't tell. "They wanted me gone," she said, her words halting. "They thought if the snow buried me, no one would ask questions." "Who?" Eli asked quietly. She closed her eyes. "Men from the camp, miners. One of them, he's the foreman, said a woman's got no place speaking her mind. I wouldn't bow my head." Her voice cracked again, and Eli felt the fire in her words more than the weakness in her body. She had spirit. That alone was enough to put a mark on her back in a land where men held the law in their fists. He leaned forward, steadying his tone. "How many?" 3, maybe 4. But he's the worst. He won't stop." Eli's jaw tightened. He had seen the type. Men who mistook cruelty for power, who believed silence and fear were their birthright to command. He stood, moved to the shutter, and pulled it back an inch. The world outside was dazzling white, the forest still and buried. No tracks cut through the fresh snow, but that didn't mean they weren't coming. "You'll be safe here till you can walk again," he said, "and if they come before then..." He lifted the rifle just enough to catch the light. "They'll regret it." Clara's eyes found his. A glimmer of trust, faint but growing, stirred there. For the first time since he had dug her out of the snow, she seemed to believe she might live through this. Eli turned, back to the fire, feeding it a log. Outside, the forest was silent, too silent, the kind of quiet that pressed on a man's ears and made him wonder what might be waiting just beyond the tree line. The storm had covered the land in snow, but storms always pass, and when they did, men came crawling out of their holes again. Eli knew it was only a matter of time. The day moved slow. By noon, the clouds broke, spilling a thin, watery light across the snowfields. Eli had kept close to the window, watching the ridge and the trail below. Nothing stirred, not a bird, not a shadow, but his gut told him it wouldn't last. Clara dozed in fits, her breath still shallow but stronger than the night before. Once, when she woke, he gave her another sip of the broth he'd made from dried venison and snowmelt. She clutched the tin cup in trembling hands. "You should go," she whispered. "They'll come for me. And for you too, if they find you here." Eli crouched beside her, his voice low. "Not the first time men have come looking for me, and I don't scare easy." She closed her eyes, sinking back against the blanket. "They'll kill you. Then they best hope they do it quick, he muttered, standing again. The hours wore on. The fire burned steady, filling the cabin with the smell of pine and smoke. Eli thought of the towns he had passed through, the faces that had looked the other way when a woman cried out, the silence men wore like a second coat. He had never cared to play savior, but leaving her in the snow had not been an option, and neither was letting her tormentors come back for her. Just as the light began to thin toward dusk, he caught movement on the ridge. A line of figures trudged through the snow, black shapes against the white slope. 3, maybe 4. Eli's hand tightened on the rifle. Clara stirred, sensing the change in him. They're here, aren't they? Stay quiet, he said. Don't move. He snuffed the lamp and let the fire burn low, stepping into the shadowed corner of the cabin. The shapes drew nearer, their voices carrying faintly through the brittle air, harsh laughter, boots crunching snow. The foreman's voice rose above the rest, thick and mean. Told you she wouldn't get far. Cold does the work for us. Another man chuckled. If a wolf didn't already. Eli's jaw set. He had heard enough. The door shook under a fist. Then another slam, harder. Open up, the foreman barked. Ain't nobody supposed to be squatting in this cabin. Clara pressed the blanket to her face, fear in her eyes. Eli stepped into the faint light, rifle leveled steady. His voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. Cabin's taken. Best keep walking. For a heartbeat, silence. Then rough laughter again. Hell, boys, the foreman jeered. Looks like the stray found herself a dog to bark for her. The door rattled under another blow. Eli's finger brushed the trigger. He knew what was coming. And he was ready. The door shook again, harder this time, dust drifting from the frame. Clara buried her face in the blanket, her shoulders trembling. Eli's stance never wavered, the rifle a dark line steady against his shoulder. The foreman's voice carried through the wood. You open this door, drifter, or we'll splinter it and drag you both out. Eli's reply was quiet, almost conversational. Try it. That single word settled into the air like a stone dropped in still water. Outside, the laughter faltered. Boots scraped against the porch, a muttered curse. Then came the crack of a rifle butt against the latch. Wood splintered. The door buckled inward an inch. Clara let out a muffled sob. Eli's eyes narrowed. He shifted his weight, steady as a rock, and called out again. Step through that door, and it'll be the last step you take. The men hesitated. One spat. He's bluffing. Ain't no drifter ready to die for some half-dead woman. But another voice cut in, uneasy, low. I heard about him. The one out of Reading. Left 3 men in the dirt 'cause they wouldn't quit. Could be the same. The foreman growled. Stories, that's all. He slammed the butt of his rifle against the door again, shattering more wood. Eli fired. The shot ripped through the silence, the bullet slamming into the doorframe inches from the foreman's hand. Splinters flew. Clara flinched, covering her ears, the cabin filled with the smell of gunpowder. Eli's voice followed, cold and sharp. That was the warning. For a moment, all was still. Then boots shuffled in the snow. He heard one of them curse, another mutter about heading back down the ridge. But the foreman wasn't done. His pride had teeth. You're gonna pay for that, drifter, he snarled. You and the little bird you're trying to save. His men's voices faded into the distance as they pulled back into the trees, but Eli knew better. They hadn't given up. They were regrouping. He lowered the rifle, the echo of the shot still ringing in his ears. Clara was staring at him wide-eyed, pale against the blankets. You could have killed him, she whispered. I will, Eli said flatly, checking the chamber, if he comes back. He crossed the room and threw another log on the fire. The flames jumped higher, chasing the shadows back. Outside, the pines whispered with the weight of coming snow. The night was far from over, and so was the fight.